Listen closely, family, because the whisper making its rounds tonight is the loudest one this internet has heard in months, and Chrisean Rock is standing directly at the center of a storm she absolutely cannot outrun anymore. The chatter circulating right now is that detectives are no longer whispering in back rooms about Chrisean Rock. They are parked outside her gym. They are camped near her apartment. They are pulling up on her friends, her family, her stylists, her drivers, her assistants, and anybody who has been photographed near Chrisean Rock in the last 90 days. And if the streets are telling the truth, Chrisean Rock knows every single one of them is closing in, and Chrisean Rock knows there is nothing left she can say online that will slow the pace of what is already in motion. For weeks upon weeks, Chrisean Rock swore up and down that no investigator had ever contacted her, that no badge had ever crossed her line of sight, that the entire theory about her being questioned in the death of Ronnie Doe was nothing more than blog gossip cooked up by content creators desperate for a headline and hungry for a viral moment. That was the Chrisean Rock version. That was the story she wanted the world to buy. That was the narrative she pushed on every live stream she ran, every caption she posted, and every interview she agreed to sit through. But the picture sharpens now, family, because Chrisean Rock has finally cracked open the door on what she used to deny, and the words coming out of her mouth are not the words of a woman who is confident, calm, or clear. Chrisean Rock is now openly admitting that the police have been questioning her. Chrisean Rock is now openly admitting that investigators have been staking out the places she goes. Chrisean Rock is now openly admitting that eyes are on her, badges are on her, and the walls she built around herself are being scaled by a task force she cannot bribe, block, buy, or bury. Brace yourself, because this is the very same Chrisean Rock who spent the last month telling the internet she was completely untouchable, completely uninvolved, and completely uninterested in whatever the blogs were reporting about her. That woman does not exist anymore. That woman was a performance. And the curtain is coming down on the performance faster than the performer is prepared for. Something changed. Something forced the shift. And when a person who has been screaming their innocence at the top of their lungs suddenly changes their story, that is not a coincidence, that is a confession moving in slow motion. That is what a rehearsed alibi sounds like when the rehearsal collapses under the weight of a real interrogation. That is what happens when a woman who once mocked the internet finally realizes that the internet was never the courtroom. And Chrisean Rock, whether she understands it yet or not, is currently living inside that collapse in real time, and every live stream she runs is another brick removed from a wall she built too high to defend. Let me set the scene for those who may be new to this saga. Ronnie Doe, known to his family as Karen, passed away in February of 2025 under circumstances that the police have refused to close the book on. Ronnie Doe was the young man who publicly stepped forward claiming to be the father of Chrisean Rock's son, a claim that Chrisean Rock rejected with venom every single time it was raised, on every platform where it was raised, in every conversation where it surfaced. Ronnie Doe was in the middle of pursuing a legal paternity test when his life ended. Ronnie Doe was scheduled to have DNA taken. Ronnie Doe was days away from proving or disproving the very thing Chrisean Rock spent months attempting to silence. And then Ronnie Doe was gone. That is not a coincidence either. That is a timeline. And the reason detectives are still working this case 16 months later is because that timeline reads like a screenplay written by somebody who understood exactly what needed to happen and exactly when it needed to happen. Every date lines up. Every threat lines up. Every live stream Chrisean Rock recorded in the weeks leading up to that morning lines up. Every message. Every voice memo. Every witness statement. Investigators do not build cases on coincidences. Investigators build cases on patterns. And this case is a pattern that has been sharpening in resolution every single week since the day the file was opened. For a long time, Chrisean Rock enjoyed the shield of speculation. Nobody could prove anything. Nobody could tie anything. Nobody could point a finger. And Chrisean Rock leaned into that shield with the kind of confidence that only comes from believing you cannot be touched. She went live. She laughed. She dismissed. She mocked. She joked about karma. She hinted at dreams. She hinted at premonitions. She hinted that anybody who crossed her would find themselves visited by forces she had aligned herself with. That was Chrisean Rock in her comfort zone. That was Chrisean Rock believing the case would fade. That was Chrisean Rock playing chess with a public she believed would forget her name by summer and move on to the next scandal by fall. Then the case did not fade. Then the case grew teeth. Then the detectives started showing up at her front door. Then the detectives started showing up at her gym. Then the detectives started showing up at the homes of the people Chrisean Rock trusts most in this world. And overnight, the woman who once bragged about being untouchable started announcing that she was taking a 30-day break from going live, that she was thinking about relocating, that she was thinking about leaving the country, that she was thinking about vanishing entirely from the very platform she built her fortune on. If the reports hold weight, that is not a coincidence either. That is a pattern. And that pattern has a name. That pattern is called panic. And panic is the one emotion no suspect can hide, because panic leaks through the microphone whether the suspect wants it to or not. Panic leaks through the pauses. Panic leaks through the deflections. Panic leaks through the sudden desire to relocate, sanitize, and reinvent. And Chrisean Rock is leaking on every frequency the audience can hear. Chrisean Rock recently went on record with a monologue that no crisis manager on this planet would have ever approved. In that monologue, Chrisean Rock spoke about Ronnie Doe with a tone that was so cold, so dismissive, and so revealing that even the people who once defended her paused mid-scroll. Chrisean Rock said the open investigation had nothing to do with her. Chrisean Rock said Ronnie Doe's death had nothing to do with her. Chrisean Rock said Ronnie Doe was desperate, high, using, drinking, and out of control. Chrisean Rock asked where his family had been while he was making claims about her son. Chrisean Rock asked why nobody had held Ronnie Doe accountable while he was still breathing. And Chrisean Rock, in that same breath, admitted that she is currently sitting in a chair across from law enforcement while investigators record her every word. Let that sink in, folks. Chrisean Rock has now confirmed, out of her own mouth, that detectives are pulling her phone records, that detectives have Ronnie Doe's device, that detectives are recording her statements, and that Chrisean Rock is fully aware she is a person of interest in an active homicide investigation. Chrisean Rock did not say it in a courtroom. Chrisean Rock did not say it in a press release. Chrisean Rock did not say it through a lawyer. Chrisean Rock said it on a public live stream, in front of her audience, while attempting to deflect suspicion. And instead of deflecting, Chrisean Rock walked directly into the very corner she has been trying to escape. Here is where it fractures. Chrisean Rock spent a portion of that monologue attacking Ronnie Doe's family. Chrisean Rock spent a portion of that monologue implying that Ronnie Doe's household was involved in trafficking substances through the basement of a home tied to his mother and grandmother. Chrisean Rock spent a portion of that monologue essentially serving up allegations that, if true, would place Chrisean Rock in the position of a witness. And if Chrisean Rock is now positioning herself as a witness to criminal activity inside Ronnie Doe's household, then Chrisean Rock has just publicly confirmed that Chrisean Rock had visibility into that household. Chrisean Rock has just publicly confirmed proximity. Chrisean Rock has just publicly confirmed access. Chrisean Rock has just publicly confirmed familiarity. Chrisean Rock has just handed detectives a road map to every corner of a home Chrisean Rock claims she had nothing to do with. That is not a defense, family. That is a self-inflicted wound. That is the kind of statement defense attorneys spend the rest of the trial trying to bury. That is the kind of statement that shows up on a projector screen in an opening argument with a highlighter across every word. And by the time Chrisean Rock's team fully understands what Chrisean Rock said out loud on that stream, that clip will already be sitting in an evidence locker with a serial number attached and a chain of custody signed off in triplicate. Because in the same breath that Chrisean Rock claims she had nothing to do with Ronnie Doe's death, Chrisean Rock is revealing that Chrisean Rock knew things about Ronnie Doe that only somebody deeply intertwined with his daily life could possibly know. And when a suspect starts throwing insider information at the wall in order to redirect suspicion, the investigators do not walk away. The investigators lean in. The investigators pull up a chair. The investigators take notes. The investigators subpoena timelines. Because every insider detail Chrisean Rock offers is another string investigators can pull, and every string investigators pull leads back to Chrisean Rock's own footprint. Moving right along. Chrisean Rock also stated, on that same live stream, that when Ronnie Doe passed away, Chrisean Rock felt nothing. Chrisean Rock said the feelings had already died before Ronnie Doe did. Chrisean Rock said the person Ronnie Doe had become was a threat to her image, a threat to her son, a threat to her brand. Chrisean Rock said Ronnie Doe was trying to diminish her character. Chrisean Rock said Ronnie Doe was clout chasing off her firstborn. And Chrisean Rock said all of this with the flat, drained tone of a woman describing an inconvenience, not a tragedy. Not a loss. Not a life. Now think about that. Ronnie Doe was the man Chrisean Rock once shared a life with. Ronnie Doe was the man Chrisean Rock introduced to her circle, invited into her world, and welcomed into her son's early months. And when Ronnie Doe died, Chrisean Rock felt nothing. Chrisean Rock said it. Chrisean Rock published it. Chrisean Rock delivered it as a headline she believed would help her. Chrisean Rock read the room and delivered a soundbite so cold it should have come with a warning label. But that headline does not help Chrisean Rock. That headline hurts Chrisean Rock. Because in any homicide investigation, the emotional response of a person close to the deceased is one of the earliest signals investigators evaluate. And Chrisean Rock has just given every detective on this case a written signature of indifference. That signature will not fade. That signature will be printed, highlighted, laminated, and read aloud in front of a jury one day, if this case gets that far. And if the current trajectory holds, this case is on track to get exactly that far, and then some. The reality landed a long time ago, folks, but Chrisean Rock is finally standing inside of it. The idea that Chrisean Rock had no reason to be watched by police was a fantasy Chrisean Rock sold to her followers because Chrisean Rock understood that as long as her fanbase believed the police were not interested, her fanbase would not question the timeline. But detectives do not consult fanbases. Detectives consult evidence. And the evidence in this case has enough weight to keep an entire investigative unit deployed 16 months after the fact. That is not the profile of a cold case. That is the profile of a case that is actively warming toward an indictment. That is the profile of a case that has stopped being about theories and started being about paperwork. Chrisean Rock even, in the middle of her rant, said the phrase that will haunt her lawyers for the next 12 months. Chrisean Rock said, and this is close to verbatim, that anytime somebody moves against her or her son, God handles it. Chrisean Rock said, on multiple occasions, that she is the karma of anybody who crosses her. Chrisean Rock said that people who move wrong against her end up meeting fates they were not prepared for. Chrisean Rock delivered those lines while smiling. Chrisean Rock delivered those lines while confident. Chrisean Rock delivered those lines before the badges started closing in. That kind of language is not a spiritual declaration when it is spoken by a person under active investigation. That kind of language is a paper trail. That kind of language is Exhibit A. That kind of language is the reason detectives have been pulling clips of Chrisean Rock's live streams and archiving them into evidence folders they hope to one day walk into a courtroom with. And the moment those clips reach a grand jury, Chrisean Rock's public bravado becomes the state's opening argument, delivered word for word, in Chrisean Rock's own voice, at Chrisean Rock's own volume. Here is the piece that a lot of people are missing. Chrisean Rock is not the only person who is suddenly the subject of interest in this case. Chrisean Rock has a sister. That sister is named Chastity Malone. And Chastity Malone has spent the last several weeks making statements on live that, if the streets are hearing them right, may prove to be the loudest self-incriminations of the year, and possibly the loudest self-incriminations this commentary space has documented in a decade. Chastity Malone recently went live and openly stated that she was intimate with somebody inside Ronnie Doe's inner circle before Ronnie Doe passed away. Chastity Malone recently went live and openly stated that she had spoken to somebody currently incarcerated. Chastity Malone recently went live and openly stated that she was in the process of calling in a favor from that incarcerated individual. Chastity Malone recently went live and openly stated, and this is the part that will echo across a grand jury room, that she was about to put a hit on somebody who has been running their mouth against Chastity Malone and Chrisean Rock's circle. Read that back. Chastity Malone announced, in real time, on a public platform, that she was calling in a favor from an incarcerated party to place a hit on a free person. Chastity Malone did not hint. Chastity Malone did not imply. Chastity Malone did not use metaphor. Chastity Malone spoke plainly. And Chastity Malone did all of this while her sister Chrisean Rock is under active homicide investigation for the death of Chrisean Rock's ex. There is not a defense attorney in America who would let a client speak like that in a Chick-fil-A parking lot, let alone on a live stream broadcasting to hundreds of thousands of viewers, archived forever, downloadable by any first-year law clerk with a subpoena and a coffee habit. The whisper making rounds tonight is that the person Chastity Malone was referring to is a public figure Chrisean Rock has been feuding with for months, a woman whose name has been trending in every corner of the commentary internet, and a woman who has been vocal about her belief that Chrisean Rock knows more about Ronnie Doe's death than Chrisean Rock has ever admitted. The chatter says Chastity Malone was threatening that woman. The chatter says Chastity Malone was announcing an intention. The chatter says Chastity Malone was practically holding a press conference about a conspiracy that had not yet occurred. And detectives, family, do not need Chastity Malone to write it down in ink. Detectives already have the video. Detectives already have the audio. Detectives already have the timestamps. And detectives already have the receipts on which incarcerated contacts Chastity Malone has been speaking to over the last 90 days. Hold that thought, because the picture only gets messier. Chrisean Rock and Chastity Malone are currently on good terms after months of publicly documented conflict. That is a fact. That reunion happened before Chastity Malone's Livestream declaration. That reunion happened during the same window that detectives began circling Chrisean Rock's daily life. And the question the internet is starting to ask, and the question detectives are almost certainly asking behind closed doors, is whether Chastity Malone was more than a witness to Chrisean Rock's grievances. The question is whether Chastity Malone was a participant. The question is whether Chastity Malone was a facilitator. The question is whether Chastity Malone was the middlewoman between Chrisean Rock's anger and someone else's action. If the streets are right, Chrisean Rock may not have needed to be present. Chrisean Rock may not have needed to be in the room. Chrisean Rock may not have needed to make the call. Because if Chastity Malone was already on the phone with the person on the other side of the concrete, then Chrisean Rock's alibi becomes purely technical. Chrisean Rock can say Chrisean Rock had nothing to do with it. Chrisean Rock can say Chrisean Rock was not there. But Chrisean Rock cannot say Chrisean Rock did not know. And Chrisean Rock cannot say Chrisean Rock did not benefit. And in a courtroom, knowledge plus benefit is a legal standard called conspiracy. Conspiracy does not require a trigger. Conspiracy only requires an agreement. And an agreement can be built out of text messages, jail calls, and one sister's Livestream monologue. Now let me pause here to remind you of a detail that keeps getting lost in this news cycle. Ronnie Doe was a week away from a paternity test. 1 week. 7 days. That is the countdown that was running when Ronnie Doe was killed. That is the ticking clock that ran out the moment Ronnie Doe stepped outside his home. That is the timeline that turned speculation into structure. That is the calendar entry that makes every prosecutor's ear stand up straight. Because if Ronnie Doe had lived long enough to take that DNA test, one of two outcomes would have unfolded. Either the results would have confirmed that Ronnie Doe was, in fact, the biological father of Chrisean Rock's son, which would have destroyed a narrative Chrisean Rock has spent years defending. Or the results would have proven that Ronnie Doe was not the father, in which case Chrisean Rock would have gained the closure she claims she wanted all along. So the only real question is this. Which outcome did Chrisean Rock believe was coming? Because that answer is the motive. That answer is why detectives keep circling. That answer is why the case will not close. That answer is why the file gets thicker every month. Chrisean Rock has always insisted, publicly and privately, that Ronnie Doe was lying, that Ronnie Doe was clout chasing, and that Ronnie Doe had no biological connection to her son. If that were true, Chrisean Rock had nothing to fear from a DNA test. Chrisean Rock could have handed over a swab, ended the debate in 24 hours, and walked away vindicated. Chrisean Rock did not do that. Chrisean Rock fought the paternity request. Chrisean Rock delayed. Chrisean Rock deflected. Chrisean Rock ran out the clock. And then the clock stopped forever. Investigators are not asking whether Chrisean Rock knows more than she is saying. Investigators already know Chrisean Rock knows more than she is saying. Investigators are asking exactly how much more. And that is a very different question. That is a question that opens filing cabinets. That is a question that opens grand jury dockets. That is a question that opens indictments. That is a question that ends with somebody in cuffs, and detectives do not spend 16 months answering that question about a woman they intend to leave alone. Detectives close files they cannot build. This file is not closing. Draw your own conclusion. Either way, here is where Chrisean Rock's story truly cracks. When Chrisean Rock finally addressed the investigation, Chrisean Rock did not deny knowing about the case. Chrisean Rock did not deny knowing about the surveillance. Chrisean Rock did not deny that investigators had questioned her. Chrisean Rock actually confirmed the surveillance. Chrisean Rock actually confirmed the questioning. And Chrisean Rock did it in the middle of an angry rant designed to intimidate her critics. Chrisean Rock did it while trying to look strong. Chrisean Rock did it while trying to look defiant. And Chrisean Rock ended up looking exposed. That is not the behavior of an innocent woman. That is not the behavior of a woman who wants closure for the father of her son. That is the behavior of a woman who is running the clock down and hoping the internet gets bored before the badges get louder. That is the behavior of a woman who mistook a homicide investigation for a public relations crisis and tried to spin it with the same tools she has always spun her other scandals. But this is not a scandal. This is a case. And cases do not respond to spin. Cases respond to evidence. And the evidence, family, is not on Chrisean Rock's side. Chrisean Rock supporters keep saying that Chrisean Rock has no reason to be nervous. Chrisean Rock supporters keep saying that if Chrisean Rock had done anything, Chrisean Rock would already be in cuffs. But Chrisean Rock supporters are missing the reality of how these cases build. Homicide investigations are not built overnight. Homicide investigations are built through months of surveillance, months of interviews, months of triangulating phone records, months of stacking witness testimony, and months of watching a suspect say exactly the wrong thing on a live stream in a moment of emotional overflow. Homicide investigations are built quietly. Homicide investigations are built slowly. Homicide investigations are built until they are unbreakable. Chrisean Rock has been saying exactly the wrong thing for weeks. Chrisean Rock has been broadcasting her nerves. Chrisean Rock has been telegraphing her anxiety. Chrisean Rock has been sending signals that no defense attorney on earth would advise a client to send. Chrisean Rock is not being careful. Chrisean Rock is being cornered. And the difference between careful and cornered is the difference between walking away from an investigation and walking into one. Now flip the coin. Let's talk about who is not being watched. The mother of Ronnie Doe is not being watched. The grandmother of Ronnie Doe is not being watched. The friends of Ronnie Doe are not being watched. Detectives are not staking out the parking lots of Ronnie Doe's family members. Detectives are not sitting outside the churches Ronnie Doe's family attends. Detectives are not lingering outside the daycares Ronnie Doe's siblings drop their children off at. Detectives are exclusively focused on the orbit surrounding Chrisean Rock. That is not coincidence, folks. That is direction. That is intent. That is a case being built around a single center of gravity, and the center of gravity is Chrisean Rock. Full stop. No asterisk. No caveat. Some voices in the commentary space are also raising questions about Blueface. Chrisean Rock's history with Blueface is documented, chaotic, and violent. Blueface has been incarcerated for a portion of this timeline. Blueface has made public statements suggesting that Chrisean Rock knows things Blueface refuses to say out loud. Blueface has hinted, in interviews and letters, that Chrisean Rock's public persona and Chrisean Rock's private movements are not the same. And now the question becomes whether Blueface is one of the incarcerated parties Chastity Malone was hinting at. That is not confirmed. That is not verified. That is only the whisper. But the whisper is loud, and detectives listen to whispers. And when a whisper lines up with a phone log and a phone log lines up with a jail call and a jail call lines up with a live stream, the whisper becomes a case. And the case becomes a courtroom. And the courtroom becomes a verdict. Meanwhile, Chrisean Rock's public statements about her son continue to blur. Chrisean Rock has said, more than once, that she is willing to do whatever it takes to protect her son from the shadow of Ronnie Doe's claims. Chrisean Rock has said, more than once, that she believes Ronnie Doe's very existence was a threat to her son's future. Chrisean Rock has said, more than once, that Ronnie Doe was trying to strip her son of his identity. Those are not the words of a passive observer. Those are the words of a woman who was actively defending her son from a perceived enemy. And in law enforcement, that phrasing is called motive. And motive plus opportunity plus proximity plus indifference is what builds a homicide file the district attorney is not afraid to sign off on. The reality landed, family, and Chrisean Rock is standing in the middle of it. Chrisean Rock has told her audience that she may leave the country. Chrisean Rock has told her audience that she is stepping away from live streams. Chrisean Rock has told her audience that she is exhausted by the trolls. But Chrisean Rock has not told her audience the one thing that would end all of the speculation, which is a clean, verified alibi for the day Ronnie Doe was killed. Chrisean Rock has not offered receipts. Chrisean Rock has not offered witnesses. Chrisean Rock has not offered a location. Chrisean Rock has not offered a timestamp. Chrisean Rock has only offered rage. Rage is not a defense. Rage is a signal. Rage is what emerges when the walls close in faster than the story can keep up. And Chrisean Rock is currently the loudest angry voice in a room that is going quiet around her. Every friend she thought was solid is being interviewed. Every associate she thought was loyal is being questioned. Every phone number she thought was clean is being pulled. And the only person still shouting is Chrisean Rock, because Chrisean Rock is the only person still trying to control a story that has already been taken out of her hands. If the reports hold weight, detectives have already secured Ronnie Doe's phone. If the reports hold weight, detectives have already pulled Ronnie Doe's location history. If the reports hold weight, detectives have already spoken with the individuals Ronnie Doe was communicating with in his final hours. And if any single one of those individuals appears in Chrisean Rock's phone, Chrisean Rock's outer circle, or Chastity Malone's inner circle, Chrisean Rock's story becomes indefensible. Chrisean Rock's story becomes a puzzle where all four corners lock into a single frame. Chrisean Rock's story becomes the state's exhibit list. Chrisean Rock has been dared, by multiple commentators, to release her own phone records. Chrisean Rock has refused. Chrisean Rock has been dared to walk into a police station voluntarily. History says the courtroom is inevitability. Let me pull the camera back for a second, because it is important that people understand who Ronnie Doe was and why this story matters beyond the drama. Ronnie Doe was a young man. Ronnie Doe had a family who loved him. Ronnie Doe had a mother who is still waiting on answers. Ronnie Doe had siblings who are still processing his absence. Ronnie Doe had a grandmother whose home was tied to Ronnie Doe's daily life. And Ronnie Doe was, whatever else he may have been, a human being who deserved a life that lasted longer than the length of a paternity dispute. Ronnie Doe did not deserve to be dismissed on a live stream. Ronnie Doe did not deserve to be spoken of like a footnote in Chrisean Rock's brand. Ronnie Doe did not deserve to be reduced to a set of allegations delivered flatly by a woman who has publicly admitted she felt nothing when Ronnie Doe died. Ronnie Doe was a person. Ronnie Doe was somebody's child. Ronnie Doe was somebody's grandson. And Ronnie Doe is now the reason detectives will not close a file that Chrisean Rock desperately wishes would close itself. There is also the question of Chrisean Rock's son. That child is at the center of every branch of this story, and yet that child has no voice in it. Chrisean Rock has claimed the child. Chrisean Rock has defended the child. Chrisean Rock has weaponized the child in arguments with critics. But Chrisean Rock has not delivered the one act that would resolve everything. Chrisean Rock has not tested the child. Chrisean Rock has not tested herself. Chrisean Rock has not tested the paternity that Ronnie Doe was demanding to test on the very day his life ended. That refusal is not a technicality. That refusal is a message. That refusal tells the audience that Chrisean Rock is more afraid of the truth than she is of the accusation. And Chrisean Rock's silence on the substantive facts of the case tells the world that Chrisean Rock is not being advised to speak. Chrisean Rock is only being advised to survive the news cycle. There is a difference between defending yourself and stalling the clock, and Chrisean Rock's playbook has been stall from the very first week Ronnie Doe's name reappeared in the news. But the news cycle is not the enemy. The news cycle will move on. The news cycle will find a new headline by Monday. The enemy of Chrisean Rock's freedom is the case file that keeps growing whether the internet is watching or not. And that case file is currently thick enough to make attorneys twice her age sweat through their suits. That case file has been photocopied, cross-referenced, indexed, tabbed, and prepared for a prosecutor whose only remaining job is to decide the exact date to walk it in front of a judge. Here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Chrisean Rock is not being persecuted. Chrisean Rock is being processed. That is a difference of one word, but it is the difference between a headline and a conviction. Persecution assumes malice from the state. Processing assumes cause. And detectives do not commit 16 months of resources to a suspect they cannot build a case around. Departments have budgets. Departments have deadlines. Departments have caseloads. If Chrisean Rock were a dead end, Chrisean Rock would already be off the board. Chrisean Rock is not off the board. Chrisean Rock is deeper into the board than she was 6 months ago. That is the trajectory. That is the truth. That is the arithmetic no publicist can reframe. Now the question shifts to timing. When does the case break? When does the indictment land? When does Chrisean Rock walk into a courtroom instead of a live stream? Nobody outside of that department can answer that with certainty. But here is what history teaches us. High-profile homicide investigations with a public suspect tend to escalate in 3 phases. Phase 1 is surveillance, which Chrisean Rock has entered. Phase 2 is public questioning, which Chrisean Rock is currently living through. Phase 3 is arrest. Phase 3 does not always come. But when Phase 3 comes, it comes fast, and it comes without warning. And by the time Chrisean Rock's followers realize Phase 3 has arrived, Phase 3 will already be halfway through the booking process. If Chrisean Rock believes she can outrun Phase 3 by relocating out of the country, Chrisean Rock is operating on outdated information. International cooperation on homicide cases has strengthened dramatically. Extradition treaties have expanded. Federal warrants can follow suspects across borders with an ease that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. If Chrisean Rock leaves the country, Chrisean Rock does not vanish. Chrisean Rock only converts a homicide file into a federal file. And a federal file is a file Chrisean Rock does not want opened. A federal file adds flight risk to the charge sheet. A federal file adds bond denial to the courtroom. A federal file adds years to any sentence a jury eventually hands down. A federal file adds a level of scrutiny that no influencer, no manager, no team of lawyers has ever been able to spin their way out of. Either way, the current picture is unmistakable. Chrisean Rock is not the woman she was 6 months ago. Chrisean Rock is not the invincible influencer, the untouchable mother, the woman who could talk her way out of every accusation with a viral clip. Chrisean Rock is now a person of interest in a homicide case that will not close. Chrisean Rock is now a subject of surveillance that will not lift. Chrisean Rock is now a target of investigation that grows more organized every single week. And Chrisean Rock knows all of that. That is why Chrisean Rock is threatening to leave. That is why Chrisean Rock is going quiet. That is why Chrisean Rock is lashing out. That is why Chrisean Rock is speaking about Ronnie Doe with the kind of coldness that no innocent person would ever risk in public. There is another layer to this that deserves to be spoken about plainly. Chrisean Rock has spent years building a brand around chaos. Chrisean Rock has monetized her fights. Chrisean Rock has monetized her breakups. Chrisean Rock has monetized her feuds. Chrisean Rock has monetized her pregnancies. Chrisean Rock has monetized every crisis she has ever walked through. And Chrisean Rock made a fatal miscalculation, which is that Chrisean Rock believed a homicide investigation could be monetized the same way. Chrisean Rock believed the outrage would translate into clicks, and the clicks would translate into safety, and the safety would translate into leverage. But homicide detectives do not care about clicks. Homicide detectives care about closing files. And every click Chrisean Rock generates is one more data point investigators can use to map Chrisean Rock's mood, motive, and movement. There is another dimension the audience keeps overlooking. Chrisean Rock has a public schedule. Chrisean Rock has a public gym. Chrisean Rock has a public apartment complex. Chrisean Rock has a public routine that Chrisean Rock broadcast to millions of people before Chrisean Rock ever needed a routine to be private. And now that routine is a roadmap. Now that routine is a surveillance advantage. Now that routine is the very reason detectives do not have to spend a single hour trying to figure out where Chrisean Rock will be tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Chrisean Rock has already told them. Chrisean Rock told the internet first, and the internet forwarded the memo to the badges. There is also the matter of Chrisean Rock's inner team. Chrisean Rock stylists have been asked to sit for interviews. Chrisean Rock's assistants have been asked to sit for interviews. Chrisean Rock's drivers have been asked to sit for interviews. That is not a rumor. That is a pattern. And when detectives start pulling in the people who handle a suspect's daily logistics, detectives are no longer trying to determine what happened. Detectives are trying to determine who was in the room when what happened was being planned. That is a very different phase of investigation. That is the phase that ends with someone offered a deal in exchange for testimony. And in every high-profile case ever prosecuted, somebody in the inner circle eventually takes that deal. Every single time. Without exception. Because loyalty is expensive, and prison is more expensive. There is also the matter of the money. Homicide cases with public suspects almost always develop a financial branch, because prosecutors want to know how a suspect funded their movements before and after the incident. Chrisean Rock's bank records will be examined. Chrisean Rock's Cash App will be examined. Chrisean Rock's PayPal will be examined. Chrisean Rock's business accounts will be examined. And if there is a single transaction that flows outward from Chrisean Rock or Chastity Malone into an account tied to anyone Ronnie Doe knew, that transaction becomes the state's smoking gun. That transaction becomes the paragraph a jury never forgets. That transaction becomes the number that turns a suspect into a defendant. There is also the matter of the digital trail. Chrisean Rock has posted for years. Chrisean Rock has DM'd for years. Chrisean Rock has commented for years. Chrisean Rock's account is a decade-long archive of Chrisean Rock's own thoughts, threats, jokes, and moods. And every single one of those posts is discoverable. Every single one of those posts can be subpoenaed. Every single one of those posts can be printed and admitted into evidence. Chrisean Rock has spent years handing prosecutors a free character witness, and that character witness is Chrisean Rock's own timeline. Let me leave you with the two questions that will decide how this story ends. First question. Do you believe Chrisean Rock had direct involvement in what happened to Ronnie Doe? Not knowledge. Not proximity. Direct involvement. Because knowledge and proximity are already established. The question is depth. Second question. Do you believe Chastity Malone was operating on her own, or do you believe Chastity Malone was operating on behalf of a sister who could not afford to have her hands on the wheel? Because Chastity Malone's public statements only make sense in one of those two frames. Either Chastity Malone was freelancing, in which case Chastity Malone has just added herself to the indictment, or Chastity Malone was coordinating, in which case Chrisean Rock's alibi collapses under the weight of a family conspiracy. Neither answer is comfortable. Neither answer is easy. Neither answer is one Chrisean Rock's fans will want to accept without a fight. But one of them is true. And detectives are going to find out which one it is long before the audience does. Detectives are going to walk into that answer with a folder in one hand and a warrant in the other. Detectives are going to publish that answer through the district attorney's press office, not through a live stream. And by the time the answer becomes public, Chrisean Rock's opportunity to shape the story will have expired. Ask yourself one more thing before you leave this video. If Chrisean Rock is innocent, why has Chrisean Rock spent 0 minutes helping the investigation? If Chrisean Rock is innocent, why has Chrisean Rock refused to name anyone who might actually be responsible? If Chrisean Rock is innocent, why has Chrisean Rock treated the memory of Ronnie Doe as a burden to be dismissed rather than a life to be honored? Innocent people cooperate. Innocent people mourn. Innocent people beg for answers. Chrisean Rock has done none of that. Chrisean Rock has done the opposite of that at every single opportunity. And that pattern is the loudest sentence in this entire case. Ask yourself another. If Chrisean Rock is innocent, why is Chrisean Rock talking about leaving the country? Innocent people do not flee. Innocent people fight. Innocent people plant themselves in front of every camera they can find and demand that the record be corrected. Chrisean Rock is not demanding the record be corrected. Chrisean Rock is threatening to abandon the record entirely. And the only people who abandon a record they cannot correct are the people who know exactly what the record will eventually say. Ask yourself one final question. If detectives had nothing on Chrisean Rock, would detectives be spending resources on a 16-month investigation? Would detectives be interviewing gym staff? Would detectives be talking to neighbors? Would detectives be pulling phone records? Would detectives be watching apartment complexes? Would detectives be sitting outside events Chrisean Rock attends? None of that is standard for a case with a thin file. All of that is standard for a case with a suspect the state believes it can eventually charge. That is not opinion. That is procedure. And procedure is what puts people in prison. Not gossip. Not opinion. Not commentary. Procedure. And the procedure in this case is running in one direction, and that direction has Chrisean Rock's name printed on the top of every folder. For now, prayers to the King family. Prayers to the mother who is still waiting. Prayers to the grandmother who is still asking. Prayers to the siblings who still show up in silence. Prayers to the friends who lost a brother and never got a public moment to grieve because the internet was too busy debating the woman who dismissed him. Justice for Ronnie Doe is not a hashtag. Justice for Ronnie Doe is a countdown. And the clock is running. And the clock is louder than any live stream Chrisean Rock will ever run again. I want to hear from you. Do you think Chrisean Rock is guilty of orchestration, or do you think Chrisean Rock is guilty of something quieter, like knowing and staying silent? Do you think Chastity Malone is the loose thread that unravels the entire case? Do you think Blueface knows more than he has said and is waiting for the right moment to say it? Do you think the police are finally close to the arrest that this family has been praying for since February of 2025? Do you think Chrisean Rock will actually leave the country, or do you think Chrisean Rock is bluffing to buy sympathy? Do you think Chastity Malone's live stream will end up being played back in a courtroom? Drop your verdict below, drop your theories below, and drop your predictions below. Because the next update on this story is coming faster than anybody thinks. And when Chrisean Rock is finally forced to answer for what she knows, this platform will be the first place you hear it. Stay locked in. Stay loud. Stay honest. And keep saying his name. Ronnie Doe. Ronnie Doe. Ronnie Doe. Say it until the badges do.